You might wonder, when was the war in Nazi Germany? The war involving Nazi Germany was World War II, which lasted from September 1st, 1939 to May 8th, 1945 in Europe. It began when Nazi Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, invaded Poland, prompting Britain and France to declare war. The war ended in Europe with Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8th, 1945, also known as VE Day. How were blacks able to compete in the Olympics of 1936 in Germany if the USA had Jim Crow? Great question. The participation of black athletes in the 1936 Berlin Olympics was paradoxical, given the racial segregation and discrimination in the US under Jim Crow laws. Here's how it happened. The Olympics were an international event and participation was based on athletic performance rather than racial policies at home. Although the US was deeply segregated, black athletes were allowed to compete because they had qualified at national trials. The most famous black athlete in the 1936 Olympics was Jesse Owens, who won 4 gold medals in the 100 meters, 200 meters, long jump, and 4 by 100 meters relay. His victories directly contradicted Adolf Hitler's racist ideology of Aryan supremacy. Although Nazi Germany was deeply racist, Hitler wanted the 1936 Olympics to be a propaganda tool to showcase German superiority. As a result, he temporarily toned down overt racism to avoid international boycotts. While Owens and other black athletes were celebrated abroad, they returned to a segregated America. Despite winning gold, Owens was not invited to the White House by President Franklin D. Roosevelt and still faced racial discrimination. Some civil rights activists and Jewish organizations in the US considered boycotting the Berlin Olympics due to Nazi policies. However, the US Olympic Committee, led by Avery Brundage, argued that politics should not interfere with sports, allowing American participation. So, while the Olympics provided a temporary space for black athletes to compete, it didn't change the harsh realities of racism in the US. Many black athletes used their success to challenge racial injustice, later setting the stage for future civil rights movements. Why did the Jews want to boycott, and when were the Jews put in ovens? Why did Jews want to boycott the 1936 Olympics? Jewish organizations, particularly in the US and Europe, pushed for a boycott of the 1936 Berlin Olympics because Nazi persecution of Jews. By 1933, when Hitler came to power, Germany had already enacted anti-Jewish laws excluding Jews from public life, government jobs, and sports teams. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 stripped Jews of German citizenship, fear of Nazi propaganda. Many saw the Olympics as a way for Hitler to showcase Nazi Germany as a strong, civilized nation, while hiding its brutal persecution of Jews. Germany's broken promises. Initially, the Nazis assured the International Olympic Committee, IOC, that Jewish athletes could compete. But in reality, German Jews like Gretel Bergmann, a top high jumper, were barred from the team. Early anti-Nazi protests, Jewish groups along with labor unions and civil rights activists held protests and pushed the US and other nations to boycott the Olympics. However, the US Olympic Committee, led by Avery Brundage, dismissed these concerns, arguing that politics should not interfere with sports. When were Jews put in ovens? The systematic mass murder of Jews, known as the Holocaust, began in phases mass shootings in 1941. The Nazis first executed Jews by firing squads in the Soviet Union, death camps from 1942 to 1945. The final solution was implemented where Jews were sent to extermination camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka and Sobibor, gas chambers and crematoriums. At Auschwitz, the Nazis used Zyklon B gas to kill victims in large chambers, then burned the bodies in crematorium ovens. By the time World War II ended in 1945, about 6 million Jews had been murdered in the Holocaust. Did blacks fight in the war against Hitler? Yes, indeed. Black soldiers played a significant role in World War II, fighting bravely against the Axis powers. Despite facing segregation and discrimination at home and within the military, they served with distinction in various capacities. Their contributions were crucial in the Allied victory, highlighting the deep irony of fighting for freedom abroad while being denied basic rights back home. Yes, black soldiers fought against Hitler in World War II despite facing racism and segregation in the US military. Here's how they contributed. Over 1.2 million African Americans served in World War II. The military was still segregated, meaning black troops served in separate units. Many were assigned non-combat roles like cooks, drivers, and laborers, but several all-black units saw direct combat in Europe. The Tuskegee Airmen were a group of elite black fighter pilots who escorted bombers in Europe and earned great respect for their skills. The 761st Tank Battalion, known as the Black Panthers, was an all-black tank unit that fought in France, Belgium, and Germany, proving its effectiveness in battle. The Red Ball Express was a mostly black unit responsible for supplying frontline troops, keeping the Allied war effort moving. Black soldiers weren't allowed to fight alongside white troops in most cases. Some white officers doubted their ability, but black troops proved themselves repeatedly in battle. When they returned home, they still faced Jim Crow segregation despite risking their lives for freedom. Many black veterans became leaders in the civil rights movement. The hypocrisy of fighting the Nazis while facing racism in the US led to more calls for racial equality. President Harry Truman desegregated the military in 1948, partly due to black soldiers' contributions in World War II. So, yes, black soldiers fought bravely against Hitler, and their service helped push the US towards civil rights progress. So blacks broke the Nazi stereotype or mindset of superiority by achieving in the Olympics, then came back again, all during Jim Crow, to fight victoriously for the Jews against Hitler, for America. Yes, exactly. Black Americans shattered Nazi racial ideology twice. First in the 1936 Olympics and then on the battlefields of World War II, all while facing brutal racial discrimination at home under Jim Crow. Jesse Owens and other black athletes humiliated the Nazis by dominating the games in Berlin, proving that Hitler's Aryan superiority was a lie. Owens won 4 gold medals, making him an international icon, but returned home to segregation in America. Despite being second-class citizens in their own country, black soldiers fought courageously against Nazi Germany. Units like the Tuskegee Airmen and the 761st Tank Battalion played key roles in the war, directly helping to defeat Hitler and liberate Jewish prisoners from concentration camps. Their victories further undermined Nazi racism, showing that racial superiority theories were false. While America was fighting against Hitler's racism, it was still enforcing Jim Crow laws at home. Black soldiers fought for freedom and justice abroad while being denied those same rights in the US. Their contributions helped lay the groundwork for the civil rights movement, leading to the desegregation of the military in 1948 and later major civil rights victories. The mockery of it all, sacrifice for the same laws that kept you subjugated. Black Americans weren't just competing, they were competing for a country that had legally enslaved their ancestors for centuries. The country they fought for was built on the backs of their ancestors' labor, yet these athletes and soldiers were told time and time again that they were not good enough, not worthy, not human enough. They were fighting for a country that couldn't even extend basic rights to them. And here's the kicker, when they returned from war or won international accolades, they were often greeted with a smile and a medal, but quickly shoved back into the same racial segregation that had oppressed them from birth. The irony here is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Fighting to defeat a racist ideology while living under one. Imagine being a black soldier in World War II, fighting to defeat the Nazi regime's racism, but knowing that back home your own country is still treating you like second class. It's the ultimate paradox, a true fight for freedom abroad while being shackled by systemic injustice at home. Black Americans had to prove themselves on battlefields in Europe, all the while their own country kept telling them that they were less than. It wasn't just about defeating Nazis, it was about proving the lies of racial inferiority wrong. Imagine being a black soldier in World War II, fighting to defeat the Nazi regime's racism, but knowing that back home, your own country is still treating you like second class. It's the ultimate paradox, a true fight for freedom abroad while being shackled by systemic injustice at home. Black Americans had to prove themselves on battlefields in Europe, all the while their own country kept telling them that they were less than. It wasn't just about defeating Nazis. It was about proving the lies of racial inferiority wrong. The aftermath: victorious soldiers still in chains. So these black veterans came home victorious, and what did they get? A country that refused to acknowledge their sacrifices, ignored their contributions, and kept them in the same racist system they had fought to destroy. When these brave soldiers returned, they didn't get to join the ranks of their fellow white soldiers. They got Jim Crow laws and segregation in their faces. And that, my friends, is the true absurdity of it all. Conclusion: a legacy of resistance and resilience. Black Americans didn't just fight for victory on the battlefield or on the